Hey guys, welcome back. I didn't go to college to waste my time. Let's get into it. We've got a problem in our society right now, at least in the United States, and it's called student loans, okay? Many of these graduates of college can't even pay on the principal alone. They're paying interest only. They can't even afford the payments because the degree they got will not justify that type of repayment plan. The jobs that are available for certain types of degrees, like history, maybe political science, maybe English, underwater basket weaving, so on and so forth, will not pay back the, outrageous student loans that people are taking out. They're taking out 50, 60, 70, dare I say, $100,000 to be an English major, okay? And I don't understand why parents, guidance counselors, the colleges, the government, or the banks are allowing this to happen. Why are they allowing an 18-year-old to go into debt, 6 figures for an English degree? Give me a break, guys. What are we doing as a society? There should be laws against that, to be honest. You shouldn't be able to take out a 6-figure loan for a freaking art degree. Go do art on your own for fun. If you want to study 1 or 2 classes just to get some ideas, or go, ask ChatGPT for some ideas for art, you can do so. You can learn all those theories by yourself. Okay, you have all the information in the world, but you're going to go out and spend 6 figures on an art degree. That's the problem we're having. We should have explicit requirements to give out a loan for a particular degree. That degree has to pay back itself, then some, okay, after it's done. All right, you have to be able to get a real job out there. And that's why you need to be considering a real degree. I'll tell you my story. When I was 18 years old, graduated school, high school, and my parents wanted me to go to college. And the main reason was to be successful and to make money, okay? And my parents would say that to me. They were both blue-collar workers, and they wanted me to make more money. So I heard this over and over and over. I heard the fact that, hey, you go to college so that you can make more money, all right? Now, I got A's and B's on average in high school, did pretty decent. I think I had maybe a 3.7, 3.8 GPA, had a few B's and C's here and there, whatever. And I was always good in science and in math. So I decided, hey, what makes the most money out there? Doctors make the most money. So I figured, hey, let's go into pre-med, okay? Now, pre-med, if you don't know, is not a degree. There's no such thing as a pre-med degree. It's simply just a track that you take going to college that, prepares you for medical school. And you have to take certain classes like biology, biochemistry, chemistry, calculus, mathematics, so on and so forth. There's a whole list of classes you take to become a doctor, okay? So you don't even sign up for an official degree when you start going to college. Many people who go to college, they go there and maybe 6 months or even a year, then they'll decide what degree they want to pursue. But for most pre-med majors, they usually do the biology degree, okay? They usually take on a biology degree. They sign up for it after, 6 months to a year, and then they go to med school and they make the big bucks. If you can finish up med school, man, you're going to be rolling in the dough, and you will be able to pay back those loans over a period of time. It could be 10, 20, 30 years for some people nowadays. College has gone up tremendously since I went, no doubt, but it is what it is. You can still pay those back if you got a great job and a great career. Now, I had to decide, as I was doing my pre-med classes, was I going to take the biology as my major? You know, I had to decide that because that was the degree that you would get to become a doctor for the most part. And you know, I thought about it quite a bit. I was in a biology class and I was in a chemistry class. Those were just 2 courses you had to start taking to go down that track. So, as I was that age, fortunately, I paid attention to some things. I paid attention to things in my life throughout the years. And instead of being on my phone or tablet, which didn't exist at that point, I was at least paying attention to some nuances in society, okay? Now, I went to a college called Central Michigan University. It's right in the center of the state. And where I lived was about 2.5 hours away in Metro Detroit. Okay, so you would go north and then you would go west a little bit. Now I could take my hand and kind of show you. It's kind of right there in the center. And I can't do it with the Osmo 3. But anyways, so it was a 2.5 hour drive. Now on that drive, I would pass through places like Pontiac, places like Flint, Michigan, Saginaw, Michigan, and Midland, Michigan. Those were the 4 major cities I would kind of pass through. And on the way up there, you know, you'd pass through the Automotive Alley, okay? Pontiac, Flint, Michigan, Saginaw, Michigan. And what do you see on the way up? Industry, okay? Industrial. The revolution was still around somewhat. I mean, I would see throughout my lifetime, you know, automotive plants close here and there, but there are still a few plants left in Michigan, fortunately. Okay, so you pay attention to that here and there. You're like, hey, there's jobs there. I could have done mechanical engineering or automotive engineering. Those are great jobs. Make some money, right? However, you know, I was doing the pre-med thing, but on the way to school, I would pass by this town called Midland, Michigan. Fairly large town. And there was 2 places there that I would pass by, and they were ginormous. One was called Dow Corning, or Corning Glassware, and the other was the Dow Chemical Company, all right? Those 2 companies are ginormous, all right? Chemicals, chemistry, there's a lot of money involved there. And I would remember driving by Dow Corning, and it was like miles long as far as the property that they owned there. And then I would drive through Midland, and there was the headquarters of Dow Chemical, okay? And then you drive by the chemical plant there. I mean, it's miles and miles of pipeline and tanks and buildings, and whatever, you know, roads, etc., etc. And so, you know, I didn't really think anything of it. I had never seen it before. My first time driving up to CMU, you know, driving through this big chemical plant, didn't really think anything of it, okay? But as I drove back and forth between home and college, you know, you go back home, you know, do some laundry, have your mom cook you some dinners, you know, maybe get some new stuff from your bedroom, whatever it is you need. You know, I did a couple trips back and forth. I did one summer where I came back home. So I did that drive quite a bit. And every time I drove by that place in Midland, I thought, man, there's a lot of money there. There's a lot of money there that, hey, maybe I could be a part of that, okay? And the risk to being a doctor is you got to be willing to go the full 8 years, or else guess what you have? You got a biology degree, guys. You got a biology degree. What are you going to do with that? You might get lucky and get a job for, you know, some ocean research vessel, or maybe for the Department of Natural Resources. Those are great jobs if you can get them, but they're few and far between. You know, there's like, what, 100 people or whatever that work for some of these things. You guys get the gist. Like, it's not a huge market. There's not a lot of money to be made. Most of it's government type of jobs. And so I passed by that place a few times and I decided I'm going to get a chemistry degree instead of a biology degree, because you could still go to med school with a chemistry degree. You could still do that. Now, it might be a little more difficult if you have to, like, you know, get into med school with a chemistry degree, but I digress. That's the decision I made. And you know what? 2 years later, I got a job as a co-op for Dow Chemical Company, okay? Somehow I must have heard, probably in the chemistry program, that there was a co-oping opportunity. And I signed up, and I think there was like only 2 kids that got in at the time, me and another girl, that we actually became friends, and we did our thesis project together. And yeah, it was what it was. I had to do 18 hours a week while I was going to school full time, 17 credit hours, and I had to do 18 hours at Dow Chemical. I had to drive there a half hour a day, hustling. You know, I was partying a lot. Don't get me wrong. I loved to party in college. I was in a fraternity, living it up. I did marching band, everything you can think of, man. I probably did it in college. It was like, you know, Animal House, that movie. But I woke up early and I went to that co-op. I was close to actually losing that job because I was so busy that sometimes I couldn't make that 18-hour requirement, but I ended up making it. You know, I had talked to some people and figured it out. And lo and behold, I ended up getting a full-time job as an analytical lab tech, I think it was what it was called. And I ended up only working there for maybe 6 months to a year as a full-time employee. After I graduated, I ended up getting a full-time chemist job, quote unquote chemist, at Pfizer right after that. This is before, obviously, you know, Pfizer came out with the you know, pandemic vaccine or whatever, long before that. So, but that's the thing. Guess what? There were jobs even after I had the job at Dow Chemical. And maybe I'll go into that too. I'm going to actually do a follow-up video on maybe why you should go into chemistry, because I think that job market is still pretty rock solid. Okay, so you know, the moral of this video is that we've got a lot of societal problems due to this student debt. We need to start thinking a little bit more about what type of loans we should be giving out to certain degrees, because there's not jobs in all these degrees. There just isn't, and it's going to be less and less and less, to be honest. I was just in a meeting last night with one of my top sales guys at our company. We had a meeting. He came into town. All we talked about the whole time was AI. That's all we talked about. And he's got kids almost my age. And we were like worrying, what are our kids going to do for college? He was like, yeah, my daughter was thinking about being a lawyer. And he was like, oh, I don't know about that. You know, ChatGPT can write up all the legal briefs behind the scenes. You almost got to be a litigator. That's the only way you're going to get a job in the legal field. Everything else will be done by AI. And, you know, programming, software engineering, maybe that's going to be obsolete. You know, you guys get the point, is that we're going to have to rethink this whole college thing. Okay. I love college. I actually still believe it is the right way to go if you do want to build wealth and be successful. There are still great degrees and great jobs out there from those degrees that you can get. But, you know, half the time, you know, including myself, am I even using that chemistry degree these days? No, I'm not. You know, I'm sure that, let me know in the comments below if you guys are using your degree these days. You probably aren't. Most people who get a degree, you know, they get out there, maybe they start in that degree, like chemistry or whatever, but then they move on from there and they find other cool, unique jobs that fulfill their needs or fulfill their, you know, paychecks, so on and so forth. But, you know, at the end of the day, that's why I went to college, was for money. I didn't go there for fun. I mean, I had fun, don't get me wrong, but I went there for the money, all right? And I finished up and I got my undergrad. I didn't go to med school. It was just too much school, to be honest. I was not that disciplined to do that, but I was disciplined enough to get a chemistry degree, to finish Calc 1, 2, and 3, and linear algebra, and physical chemistry, analytical chemistry, organic chemistry. I could go on and on. You know, it was a lot of work, but it was all worth it because I decided to go into a field that had some money, okay? That's what you got to do when you're going to college. Don't be going to college for underwater basket weaving. It's not going to help you. It's going to destroy you and your wealth. You're going to be 100K in debt and be broke the rest of your life because you'll just be paying on the interest. Okay, and I'm going to do another video too on that because there's some ridiculous things going on when it comes to the payback of those loans. So we'll get into that later. So anyways, if you guys enjoy this content, like and subscribe if you could, and take a look at my previous video. And everyone, have a great day. Thanks.